The moment I settled into the airport lounge, exhausted and craving silence, I never imagined the passenger who'd end up next to me on the flight home would be the most powerful CFO on our client roster. What started as idle small talk about cramped seats would ignite a chain reaction that cost someone $54 million and brought down the one who thought himself untouchable. One seat swap, one perfectly timed conversation, and the power game began. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I've spent the last 7 years climbing the invisible ladder of New York's tech consulting world, one PowerPoint deck and strategy framework at a time. That Thursday evening in March, I was 32, running on 3 hours of sleep, and desperate to get home from the annual Tech Forward conference in San Francisco. Gate 27B was packed with the usual suspects: venture capitalists in Allbirds, startup founders in hoodies worth more than my monthly rent, and consultants like me, distinguishable by our identical away carry-ons and the permanent dark circles under our eyes. I'd secured an aisle seat in row 12, already mentally preparing for 5 hours of blessed isolation with my noise-canceling headphones. Then came the announcement: "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a minor seat reassignment due to a mechanical issue with one of our business class seats." The gate agent approached me with that apologetic smile they perfect in training. "Ms. Mitchell, would you mind terribly moving to 14C, same aisle access, just 2 rows back?" I minded. God, I minded. But what are you going to say? I gathered my things laptop bag, the conference tote I'd never use again, my overpriced airport salad, and trudged back to find my new spot already occupied by a man in the middle seat. He looked up from his phone, and something in my exhausted brain pinged with recognition. Mid-50s, silver hair that suggested expensive barbers rather than genetics, wearing jeans and a plain black t-shirt that somehow still screamed money, the kind of understated wealth that didn't need logos. "Looks like we're neighbors," he said, shifting to make room. His voice carried that particular tenor of someone used to being listened to in boardrooms. That's when it hit me. James Worthington, CFO of Nexus Financial Systems, our biggest client, the one whose contract alone kept 40% of our New York office employed. Small world, I managed, sliding into my seat while trying to look like I hadn't just recognized him. In consulting, you learn quickly that executives prefer to be anonymous on planes. It's their sacred space away from people like me. But Worthington seemed chatty. Maybe it was the 2 whiskeys I could smell on his breath. Or maybe he was just one of those executives who got lonely at the top. "You were at Tech Forward, weren't you?" he asked. "I think I saw you at the Goldman Sachs happy hour." I had been there, standing in a corner nursing a warm Prosecco while our new CMO, Marcus Reed, held court with potential clients, his laugh carrying across the rooftop bar like a foghorn. I'd been explicitly told my role that evening was to support the presentation materials, if needed. Translations stand there and be invisible unless someone needs their PowerPoint fixed. "Briefly," I said, "I'm with Stratton Consulting. We're actually—" "Oh, you're working on our digital transformation project," Worthington interrupted, his interest visibly sharpening. "How's that going? Marcus keeps sending these gorgeous decks, but I'll be honest, I can't make heads or tails of half of it. All that synergy and paradigm shift language makes my eyes glaze over." My stomach tightened. Those gorgeous decks were Marcus's butchered versions of my team's analysis. He'd stripped out every piece of substantive data, every risk assessment, every realistic timeline, replacing them with stock photos and buzzword bingo. "It's progressing," I said carefully. Worthington laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That's what Marcus keeps saying. Progressing. Meanwhile, I've got board members breathing down my neck about the $54 million we're paying you folks, and I can't give them a straight answer about what we're actually getting." The plane pushed back from the gate. The safety demonstration began. But Worthington kept talking, lowering his voice just enough. "Between you and me," he said, "I'm starting to wonder if we made the right choice. The team from Deloitte had actual numbers, timelines, KPIs that meant something, but Marcus had all that charisma. You know, that whole trust the process thing. I should have changed the subject, should have put my headphones on, should have done anything except what I did next. "What kind of numbers are you looking for?" I asked. And just like that, the game began. Worthington pulled out his iPad, swiping through what I recognized as Marcus's latest deck, the one I'd originally spent 3 weeks building with my team, now transformed into what looked like a tech company's recruitment brochure. Gone were the dependency charts, the risk matrices, the phased implementation timeline that would actually work. In their place, abstract art masquerading as process flows and enough gradient backgrounds to make a designer weep. See this? He pointed to a slide titled Synergistic Integration Pathway. What the hell does this mean? My CTO asks me about API integration timelines, and I'm showing him pictures of interconnected circles. I knew exactly what it used to mean. That slide had originally been a detailed technical architecture diagram showing how Nexus's legacy systems would connect with the new cloud infrastructure. It had taken me 2 days and 3 meetings with their IT team to map it correctly. Now it looked like someone had played connect the dots while high. The original version was probably more technical, I said, testing the waters. Original version, Worthington's eyebrows raised. Marcus told me these were the comprehensive deliverables. The flight attendant interrupted, offering drinks. Worthington ordered another whiskey. I asked for coffee, black. I needed to be sharp. As we climbed to cruising altitude, my mind raced back to 3 weeks ago. The turning point. The moment Marcus Reed had walked into our team meeting, fresh from his CEO buddy hire situation, designer sneakers squeaking against the conference room floor. "Sarah, fantastic work on the Nexus documentation," he'd said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "I'm going to take point on the client relationship from here. You know how these C-suite guys are? They respond better to, well, executive presence. Executive presence. Code for you're a 30-something woman who won't golf with them at Westchester Country Club." He'd taken my 200-page strategic analysis and turned it into a 30-slide fever dream. When I'd pushed back, citing the client's specific requirements, he'd laughed. "Sarah, you're too in the weeds. Clients don't want details. They want vision. They want to feel inspired." "Mr. Worthington," I said now, choosing my words carefully, "what specific concerns are your board members raising?" He took a sip of his whiskey. "Timeline slippage, budget overruns, the fact that we're 4 months in and can't show a single integrated system, but every time I ask Marcus for specifics, I get another deck about transformation journeys and digital ecosystems. 4 months. 4 months of my team working 60-hour weeks, documenting every system, every process, every integration point. 4 months of Marcus presenting our work as abstract art, while taking credit for strategic vision. In your experience, Worthington continued, how long should a Phase 1 integration actually take? Not the sales pitch version, the real version. This was it. The moment where I could stay silent, stay safe, stay employed, or I could tell the truth. With your legacy infrastructure, I said, 16 weeks for basic API connectivity, another 8 for data migration validation. That's assuming no major surprises in your COBOL backend, which honestly, there always are. Worthington turned to look at me directly. That's incredibly specific. That's because it's based on actual analysis. Analysis that Marcus did. I let the silence stretch between us, the drone of the engines filling the gap. Sometimes the most powerful answer is the one you don't give. Jesus Christ, Worthington muttered, understanding dawning on his face. There's another version of all this. Isn't there a real version? I took a sip of my coffee. I couldn't speak to internal documentation practices. But hypothetically, he pressed, if someone wanted to see what the actual project plan looked like, the one with real timelines, dependencies, risk assessments that would exist somewhere, hypothetically, I said, looking straight ahead, competent consultants always maintain comprehensive documentation. It would be irresponsible not to. Worthington was quiet for a moment, then pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. Even from my angle, I could see he was messaging his assistant. Schedule emergency review meeting Monday. Request all project documentation from Stratton. Original versions. The scent of danger was intoxicating. After months of being sidelined, of watching my work get butchered, of being told I lacked executive presence, I was finally in control of the conversation that mattered. You know, Worthington said, his voice casual but his eyes sharp. We're thinking of bringing more strategic work in-house, building our own team, The kind of team that values, he paused, comprehensive documentation. The offer hung in the air between us, unspoken but crystal clear. The plane hit turbulence, and my mind drifted back to the pattern of humiliation that had become my daily reality under Marcus Reed's reign. It started small the way workplace degradation always does. First, it was the meeting 3 months ago when I'd presented the initial Nexus framework to our internal team. I'd spent 2 weeks building it, interviewing stakeholders, mapping every system dependency. Marcus had sat in the back, scrolling through his phone. When I finished, he'd stood up slowly, that practiced smile spreading across his face. Great effort, Sarah. Really solid work. But there's always a but with men like Marcus. It's a bit academic, isn't it? Where's the story? Where's the emotion? Emotion. In a technical infrastructure analysis. Let me show you how we elevate this, he'd said, commandeering my laptop, deleting entire sections of risk analysis with casual clicks. See, now it breathes, now it inspires. Tom Rodriguez from my data team had tried to intervene. Marcus, those risk assessments are critical. Nexus specifically requested. Tom, buddy, Marcus had interrupted, his voice dripping condescension. I've been doing this since before you were in business school. Trust the process. The process? Marcus's process was systematic destruction. Every week, he'd take our work and elevate it. Detailed migration plans became transformation journeys. Cost-benefit analyses became value creation narratives. Hard numbers disappeared, replaced by what he called aspirational metrics. The worst part, he was smart about it, never put anything in writing, always delivered his edits verbally, in person. So there was no paper trail. When things went wrong, guess whose documentation was on file? The original. Academic versions with our names on them. I remembered the Tuesday when everything crystallized. Marcus had called me into his office, the corner one that used to belong to Jennifer Walsh, before she'd been pushed out to make room for the CEO's friend. Sarah, we need to talk about your presentation style, he'd said, leaning back in his Herman Miller chair. You're brilliant with the details. Really you are. But when you present to executives, you get too intense. It can be off-putting. Intense, I'd repeated. You know, aggressive. When you correct people on technical points, it makes clients uncomfortable. I'd corrected him once, when he'd told Worthington's team that data migration could happen over a weekend. I gently suggested it might take longer. That was aggressive. Maybe for the next client meeting, he'd continued. You could focus on running the slides while I handle the talking. You're so good with the clicker. The clicker? 7 years of expertise reduced to pressing a button on cue. My team had watched it happen, powerless and frustrated. During our Thursday night working sessions, the ones Marcus never attended because he had strategic dinners, they'd vent their frustration. He told the client we could integrate their payment systems in 2 weeks. Amy from development had said one night, stress-eating her 3rd bag of vending machine chips. 2 weeks. It took Wells Fargo 3 months, and they had twice our resources. He doesn't care, Tom had replied. By the time it falls apart, he'll have moved on to the next shiny object, and we'll be left holding the bag. They were right, of course. Marcus's LinkedIn profile told the story never more than 18 months at any company, just long enough to claim credit for initiatives, not long enough to see them fail. But the final straw had come last week. The day before the conference, I discovered Marcus had submitted my entire Nexus strategy framework to the Industry Innovation Awards under his name. My work, my analysis, my insights, now attributed to Marcus Reed, visionary strategic leader. When I'd confronted him, he hadn't even bothered to deny it. Sarah, this is how the game works, he'd said, not looking up from his phone. I'm the face of the relationship. The client trusts me. Your work, my work, it's all the same team, right? Don't be so possessive. Possessive? About my own intellectual property. Besides, he'd added, finally making eye contact, you should be grateful. Your work is getting executive visibility. Through me, of course. But still, that's how careers are made. I'd stood there, in his corner office with its views of Madison Avenue, feeling something inside me shift. Not break that had happened weeks ago. This was different. This was crystallization. The moment when anger transforms into something harder, colder, more useful. "You're right, Marcus," I'd said, my voice perfectly calm. "That is how the game works." He'd smiled, pleased with my apparent capitulation. "I knew you'd come around. You're smart, Sarah. Maybe not executive material, but smart enough to know your place. My place." As I sat next to Worthington at 35,000 feet, his questions getting more specific, his frustration with Marcus more apparent, I thought about places, about the place Marcus thought he'd put me in, about the place I was about to put him. "You know what bothers me most," Worthington said suddenly, pulling me back to the present. "It's not even the money, it's the disrespect. Being treated like I'm too stupid to understand real information, like I need everything dumbed down and prettied up." "That must be frustrating," I said, my voice neutral. "It's insulting," he corrected, "and costly. We're hemorrhaging talent because no one knows what we're actually building. My best engineers are jumping ship to startups because they think we have no technical vision. Meanwhile, Marcus is selling them on digital transformation journeys." The plane banked slightly, beginning its descent preparation. Time was running out. The fasten seatbelt sign illuminated, and I found myself at a crossroads 30,000 feet above Missouri. Worthington had returned to his iPad, furiously taking notes, occasionally muttering about missing KPIs and phantom deliverables. The smart play was to stay quiet, let him draw his own conclusions, keep my fingerprints off whatever came next. But Smart had gotten me relegated to PowerPoint duty. Smart had watched my work get plagiarized. Smart had kept me silent while Marcus destroyed everything my team had built. I thought about Margaret Liu, my mentor from my first job at McKinsey. She'd been the only female senior partner in the New York office, a woman who'd clawed her way up through decades of being told she was too aggressive, too detailed, too much. Over drinks one night, after I'd lost a promotion to a guy who'd literally used my deck in his interview, she'd told me something I'd never forgotten. "Sarah, they want us to play nice, to wait our turn, to trust that merit will eventually win." She'd laughed bitterly. "But the game is rigged, and the only way to win a rigged game is to change the rules. You don't ask for permission to tell the truth. You find the right moment, the right audience, and you make the truth impossible to ignore." The right moment, the right audience. I glanced at Worthington, CFO of a Fortune 500 company, decision maker on a $54 million contract, currently frustrated, slightly drunk, and asking all the right questions. "Mr. Worthington," I said, pulling out my phone, "would you like to see something interesting?" He looked over, curious. I opened my photo gallery, scrolling to a folder I'd labeled Insurance, Screenshots, every original document before Marcus's elevation, every timestamp showing when changes were made, every email where I'd raised concerns, professionally and clearly, only to be overruled. "I probably shouldn't be showing you this," I said, which was true. But since we're having a hypothetical conversation about documentation, I showed him a side-by-side comparison. My original timeline, 16 weeks of carefully planned sprints, with built-in buffer time for the inevitable COBOL surprises. Marcus's version, 6 weeks of agile transformation with no technical specifics. "Holy shit," Worthington said, loud enough that the woman across the aisle looked over. He lowered his voice. "This is what Marcus stripped out." "I couldn't comment on internal editorial decisions," I said carefully. "But I believe in data, in facts, in giving clients the information they need to make informed decisions. This risk assessment," he pointed to a section about potential system conflicts. "This exact issue happened last week. Our payment system went down for 6 hours, cost us $8 million in delayed transactions." I stayed silent. Sometimes the best confirmation is no confirmation at all. "And this," he indicated a compatibility warning about their legacy database. "We just discovered this yesterday. My CTO was blindsided. Marcus said it was an unexpected complication." "Unexpected complications are rarely unexpected," I said. "They're just undocumented." Worthington was scrolling faster now, his face growing darker with each swipe. "There are 43 identified risks in your document. Marcus's deck mentions 3 and calls them growth opportunities. The pilot announced our initial descent into JFK, 20 minutes until landing. Can you send me these? Worthington asked. This was the line. The bright, clear line between professional disagreement and corporate sabotage. Sending internal documents to a client without authorization wasn't just a firing offense, it could be career suicide, legal action, industry blacklisting. But then I thought about Amy. Working until 2 a.m. to fix problems Marcus pretended didn't exist. About Tom, whose warnings were dismissed as negativity, about my entire team, branded as two in the weeds, while Marcus collected awards for our work. I can't send you internal documents, I said. Worthington's face fell. But, I continued, I believe Nexus has the contractual right to request all project documentation, original versions, with timestamp histories. Understanding dawned in his eyes. And if we made such a request, Stratton would be legally obligated to comply, within 48 hours, if I remember the contract correctly. You remember correctly, he said, a small smile playing at his lips. You know, when we request those documents, we'll need someone who understands them, someone who can translate the real information into actionable insights. That would be helpful, I agreed. Someone who values accuracy over aesthetics, facts over feelings. A rare quality these days. He pulled out his business card, not the corporate one, but a plain white card with just his personal email. Hypothetically, if someone with those qualities were looking for a new opportunity, say, leading a strategic initiatives team, reporting directly to the C-suite, significant equity participation. I took the card, running my finger along its edge. That would be an interesting hypothesis. The landing gear deployed with a mechanical whir. Below us, New York sprawled in the afternoon sun. A million offices where a million games were being played. Monday morning, Worthington said, I'm calling an emergency board meeting. We're going to review every piece of documentation from this project, every original document, every revision, every timestamp. That sounds thorough. Oh, it will be. And when we find discrepancies between what we were promised and what we were shown, well, he let the sentence hang. Contracts have clauses about misrepresentation. Misrepresentation, a polite word for fraud, a 54 million word. As we taxied to the gate, I made my decision, not in sending documents I'd already decided against that, but in something more powerful, being ready for what came next. Mr. Worthington, I said as we prepared to deplane, thank you for an illuminating conversation. Thank you, Sarah, he replied, emphasizing my name. For your honesty, it's refreshing. We parted ways at the jet bridge. He headed toward the Admiral's Club, already on his phone with what sounded like his legal team. I walked toward baggage claim, feeling lighter than I had in months. My phone buzzed. A text from Tom. Marcus just scheduled an all-hands for Monday to celebrate his Innovation Award. Mandatory attendance. I smiled. Monday was going to be interesting. The game wasn't over, but for the first time in months, I wasn't playing by Marcus's rules anymore. I was playing by Margaret Liu's change the rules, make the truth impossible to ignore. And sometimes, the most powerful move isn't the document you send, it's the question you plant in exactly the right mind. Monday arrived like a storm system you can see on radar, but can't avoid. I arrived at the office early, 6:47 a.m., according to the security log, needing the quiet before chaos. The 32nd floor was empty except for the cleaning crew and Jessica from IT, who practically lived there. You're in early, she said, looking up from a server maintenance screen. Big week, I replied, which was the understatement of my career. By 9 a.m., the office hummed with its usual controlled chaos. Marcus had sent 3 emails about his all-hands celebration, each more self-congratulatory than the last. The latest included a photo of his Innovation Award trophy and the subject line, Excellence in Strategic Vision, a Masterclass. I was reviewing deployment schedules with my team when Amy rushed in, face flushed. Sarah, something's happening. Nexus just requested everything, and I mean everything. My pulse stayed steady. What kind of everything? Every document, every revision, every email. They want the complete project history, original files with metadata. The legal team is freaking out. Tom looked up from his laptop. They can't want the originals. Marcus would never. It's not Marcus's call, Amy interrupted. The request came from Worthington himself, CC'd their entire board and our CEO. I kept my expression neutral, though inside, the dominoes were starting to fall exactly as I'd anticipated. Within an hour, the 32nd floor transformed from business as usual to barely controlled panic. Marcus emerged from his office, designer sneakers squeaking against the marble floor, his face a shade of red I'd never seen before. "Team meeting, conference room A, now," he barked. We filed in, 23 of us cramming around a table meant for 15. Marcus stood at the head, his usual swagger replaced by something that looked dangerously close to fear. "There's been a misunderstanding with the Nexus account," he began, his voice missing its usual performative confidence. "They've requested documentation that might be misinterpreted without proper context." "What kind of misunderstanding?" asked David from sales, genuinely confused. Marcus's jaw tightened. "They seem to think there are discrepancies between our strategic vision and some early draft documents." Early drafts, that's what he was calling months of detailed work. "I need everyone to understand." Marcus continued, his eyes scanning the room but avoiding mine. "That in strategic consulting, we iterate, we evolve. What matters is the final vision, not the preliminary paperwork." Jessica from legal entered without knocking, her face pale. "Marcus, we need you upstairs, now. The CEO wants to see you." "Tell him I'll be there in—" "Now, Marcus." The room fell silent. In 4 years at Stratton, I'd never seen legal interrupt a meeting. Marcus left, and the room erupted in whispers. I stayed quiet, watching Amy pull up her email, her eyes widening. "Holy shit," she whispered. "Worthington's assistant just sent a calendar invite. Nexus Strategic Review Documentation Analysis. It's tomorrow at their headquarters. They're requesting specific team members attend to explain discrepancies." "Who's on the list?" Tom asked. Amy's eyes met mine. "Sarah's at the top." The rest of the day unfolded like a corporate thriller. Marcus returned from the CEO's office looking pale, locked himself in his room for an hour, then emerged demanding to see all original documentation, the same documentation he'd dismissed as too academic for months. "I need to understand what they think they're seeing," he said, standing over my desk, trying to project authority but achieving only desperation. I pulled up the files, the ones he'd never bothered to actually read. "This is the original risk assessment. 43 identified integration challenges with mitigation strategies." His face went white as he scrolled through it. "Why didn't you escalate these risks?" "I did." I opened my email, showing the trail. 17 times. You responded that I was being, quote, unnecessarily alarmist and needed to embrace optimistic planning. "That's not, I meant," he was floundering. "There's also this." I pulled up another document, the technical architecture specification, 200 pages of system dependencies that you reduced to a single slide of interconnected circles. People had started gathering around my desk, drawn by the unusual sight of Marcus Reed speechless. "And here," I continued, my voice perfectly professional, "is the email where you explicitly instructed me to remove the COBOL compatibility warnings because they were, quote, too in the weeds for executive consumption." "You should have pushed back harder," he said weakly. "I have that too," I said, opening another email. My formal objection to the documentation changes, submitted to HR, dated 6 weeks ago. Marcus stepped back like I'd slapped him. He hadn't known about the HR filing. I'd been building my insurance policy for months. Around 4 p.m., an email went out from Worthington to our CEO, copied to what looked like half the Fortune 500. After preliminary review of requested documentation, Nexus Financial Systems has significant concerns about the discrepancies between technical assessments and executive presentations. We require immediate clarification on why critical risk factors were systematically removed from client communications. Please have the original project team available for a full review tomorrow at 9 a.m. The original project team, not Marcus, not his strategic vision, the people who actually did the work. Marcus made one last attempt at control. He called an emergency meeting at 5 p.m., mandatory for everyone involved in the Nexus account. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said, his voice trying for inspirational but landing on desperate. We present a united front. We're a team. We succeed or fail together. Tom laughed, actually laughed. Now we're a team, after months of you taking credit for our work. That's not... You submitted Sarah's framework for an innovation award, Amy interrupted. Under your name, we all know it. The room turned to look at me. I stayed silent, but my silence said everything. Marcus's phone rang. He looked at the screen, and his last bit of color drained away. I have to take this, he said, stepping out. Through the glass wall, we watched him pace, gesture frantically, then slowly deflate. When he returned, he looked like a man who'd just gotten his own death sentence. That was Nexus's legal team, he said quietly. They're considering action for breach of contract due to material misrepresentation. Material misrepresentation. There it was, the 54 million phrase. Everyone should go home, he said, not meeting anyone's eyes. Tomorrow will be challenging. As people filed out, Marcus stopped me. Sarah, you did this. It wasn't a question. I documented everything, I replied. You did the rest. He wanted to say more. I could see it in his eyes. Some threat, some blame, some attempt to make this my fault. But we both knew the truth. The paper trail was clear. The timestamps didn't lie. The board meets tonight, he said finally. Emergency session. I gathered my things, leaving him standing alone in the conference room, surrounded by the ghost of his strategic vision. As I waited for the elevator, my phone buzzed. An email from Worthington, sent only to me. Ms. Mitchell, I look forward to your presentation tomorrow. Please bring all original documentation. We're very interested in understanding your actual strategic approach. Your actual strategic approach, not Marcus's, mine. The elevator arrived, and as the doors closed, I caught my reflection in the polished steel. For the first time in months, I was smiling. Tuesday morning arrived crisp and clear, one of those rare Manhattan days where the city seemed to gleam with possibility. The Nexus Financial Systems headquarters occupied floors 45 through 60 of a glass tower that scraped the sky above Bryant Park. I arrived at 8:30, my team in tow. Amy, Tom, and 4 others who'd actually built what Marcus had been selling. The executive conference room was a study in corporate power, floor-to-ceiling windows, a table that could seat 30, and a view that made you understand why companies paid $200 per square foot for Manhattan real estate. Worthington was already there, along with their CEO Patricia Keene, their CTO, and what looked like most of their board. Marcus entered 5 minutes late, his usual swagger replaced by something brittle. He'd worn his most expensive suit, but it couldn't hide the sleepless night written across his face. Our CEO, Richard Dalton, followed behind him, his expression unreadable. Let's begin, Patricia Keene said, her voice cutting through the pleasantries like a blade. Mr. Reed, perhaps you could start by explaining your innovative strategic vision for our digital transformation. Marcus launched into his presentation, the same slides we'd all seen dozens of times, gradient backgrounds, circular workflows, synergy upon synergy, but in this room, with these people, the Emperor's clothes were suddenly, painfully absent. Excuse me, the CTO interrupted after slide 3. This synergistic integration pathway, can you explain the actual technical implementation? Marcus gestured vaguely. It's about creating holistic connections between systems. That's not a technical explanation, the CTO said flatly. I'm asking about APIs, data protocols, migration sequences, the actual how. Well, those details are right here, Worthington interrupted, pulling up his tablet. In the original documentation created by Ms. Mitchell's team, documentation that seems to have been edited before reaching us. The room shifted its attention to me. This was it. May I asked, standing. Patricia nodded. I connected my laptop to the screen, pulling up the original framework. No gradients, no stock photos, just clear technical documentation. This is what we actually built, I began. A 16-week phased implementation addressing your 43 identified system dependencies. Each phase has specific deliverables, measurable KPIs, and built-in risk mitigation. This is completely different from what we've been seeing, Patricia said, her voice dangerously quiet. Perhaps Mr. Reed can explain why he felt these details weren't important enough to share, Worthington suggested. Marcus stood. Strategic communication requires simplification. Lying, the CTO interrupted. The word you're looking for is lying. That's not... You told us integration would take 6 weeks, Patricia said, reading from her notes. Ms. Mitchell's documentation clearly shows it requires 16 weeks minimum. You said there were no COBOL compatibility issues. This document identifies 17. You promised seamless data migration. This shows 14 specific challenges that require manual intervention. Marcus looked to our CEO for support, but Richard Dalton was studying the documentation on his own tablet, his face growing darker with each swipe. Sarah, Patricia addressed me directly, walk us through what actually happened, all of it. For the next 40 minutes, I presented the truth, every analysis, every risk, every realistic timeline. Amy jumped in with the data architecture. Tom covered the security protocols. We showed them what $54 million of actual work looked like, not the fantasy Marcus had been selling. This compatibility issue, their CTO pointed to a specific section. This exact problem crashed our payment system last week, cost us $8 million. We identified that risk 4 months ago, I said, pulling up the timestamp. It's documented here, with 3 proposed mitigation strategies. Which we never saw, Patricia said, her gaze fixed on Marcus. Marcus tried one last gambit. The team should have escalated these concerns. They did, Richard Dalton finally spoke, his voice like gravel. I've been reviewing the email trail. Ms. Mitchell filed formal objections 6 weeks ago. Mr. Rodriguez raised concerns in 12 separate meetings. The entire team pushed back on your revisions. He turned to the Nexus board. I was not aware of these discrepancies until yesterday. This is not how Stratton Consulting operates. No, Patricia agreed. But apparently it's how Mr. Reed operates. She pulled out a folder, thick with legal documents. This constitutes material breach of contract, gross misrepresentation of project status, deliberate omission of critical risk factors, and what our legal team views as systematic fraud. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Fraud. We're terminating the contract, Patricia continued. Effective immediately, we'll be seeking damages for the integration failures your misrepresentations caused. However, Worthington added, looking at me and my team, we're very impressed with the actual work that was done, the real work. We'd like to discuss bringing this team in-house to complete the implementation properly. Marcus's face cycled through colors I didn't know were humanly possible. You can't poach our people. We're not poaching, Patricia said coolly. We're offering to hire competent professionals who've been wasted under incompetent leadership. Richard Dalton closed his tablet with a snap. Mr. Reed, please return to the office immediately. Clean out your desk. HR will handle the rest. You can't. I can and I am. You've cost us our biggest client, exposed us to legal liability, and destroyed our reputation. He turned to me and my team. I apologize for not seeing this sooner. Ms. Mitchell, Mr. Rodriguez, all of you. Stratton failed you. I failed you. Marcus stood, his chair scraping against the floor. This is a witch hunt. I delivered results. You delivered PowerPoint. Patricia cut him off. Ms. Mitchell delivered strategy. There's a difference. Security appeared at the door not aggressively, but their presence was clear. Marcus looked around the room, searching for an ally, finding none. Sarah orchestrated this, he said desperately. She manipulated. The only thing Ms. Mitchell did, Worthington interrupted, was document the truth. You buried it. That's not manipulation. Mr. Reed, that's justice. Marcus left, escorted by security and what remained of his dignity. The door closed behind him with a soft click that somehow sounded final. Patricia turned to me. Ms. Mitchell, we'd like to offer you the position of Vice President of Strategic Initiatives. Your team as well, if they're interested. Full relocation packages, equity participation, and the authority to actually implement your vision. I looked at my team. Amy was trying not to smile. Tom was already smiling. The others looked stunned but hopeful. "We're interested," I said. The meeting continued for another hour, but the real business was done. Marcus Reed was finished, the $54 million contract was dead, and from its ashes, something better was rising. As we left the building, Amy grabbed my arm. "Did you plan this?" I thought about that flight, about Worthington's questions, about the moment I chose to show him those screenshots. "I documented everything," I said. "Marcus did the rest." But we both knew the truth. Sometimes the best revenge isn't what you do, it's what you allow others to see. The news broke Wednesday morning like a thunderclap across Manhattan's consulting corridor. The Business Insider headline was brutal in its simplicity. Stratton Consulting loses $54 million Nexus contract amid fraud allegations. CMO Marcus Reed terminated. I read it over coffee in my soon-to-be former office, watching the city wake up 40 floors below. My phone hadn't stopped